Hello, I'm Jeff Paur, senior writer with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Welcome to another edition of the RealTime Fantasy Sports Show right here on the Better Sports Network. I'm joined by Mike Barner once again, contributing writer here with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Mike, third week in a row. Thanks a lot for joining me. I appreciate you being my co-host once again.
My pleasure. Looking forward to talking some more fantasy football today. Season's coming up quick. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's get into the topic we're going to talk about. So I thought it'd be good this weekend and next weekend. I feel the biggest draft weekends of the year, especially for all of you in your home leagues. So if you're getting ready to draft this weekend, Mike and I are going to get you ready. We're going to talk draft prep. So not so much going over specific players, but we're going to talk about strategy for drafting. How do you prepare for a draft? What to look for during the draft? What not to do during the draft? Just thoughts on drafting this season as well. So we're going to hit on all the drafting topics, getting ready for your leagues this weekend and next. So, Mike, it should be a lot of fun. There's definitely a lot to talk about when it comes to draft prep, for sure.
Yeah, it's going to be hard to keep this under 30 minutes, but I'll try my best not to ramble too much.
Yeah, for sure. And we got another giveaway this week, and it's a good one. We're giving away an entry into the Real-Time Fantasy Sports Championship. That's the biggest contest on our site at rtsports.com. $500,000 is the grand prize for the Real-Time Fantasy Sports Championship. Leagues are drafting live and even slow drafting every day until the contest sells out. It's $1,600 in league prizes as well. So it's not just an overall prize. You can win in your league too. And this prize is valued at $300. You must be a legal U.S. resident at least 18 years of age to win. And you can also get an exclusive offer, a 100% deposit match up to $200 right now. Go to rtsports.com/alarm and use the promo code alarm23. You want to take advantage of that if you're new to the site. So it's a 100% deposit match up to $200. Again, go to rtsports.com/alarm. Use the promo code alarm23. Again, please play responsibly. Call 1-800-GAMBLER for any help. Also, you're going to be able to be eligible if you have not won this contest in the last 30 days. So we'll do that giveaway a little later, Mike, but we have all sorts of leagues going off at Real-Time Fantasy Sports right now. I mean, you name it, different price points, different options, whatever you want to do, go to rtsports.com. Drafts going off around the clock as well. How about you, Mike? You in a lot of drafts at this point of the season?
Yeah, I think I've already drafted 5 or 6 teams. I've kind of lost count. I've got at least a couple more home leagues. Like you said, we're coming around the corner here. So yeah, this is definitely the thick of it, especially for home leagues. This is the last couple weekends to do it.
Exactly. I have 2 home leagues still coming up. So let's get into it. Let's talk about draft prep. Let's give all of our viewers out there too as well. If you have any questions at all, feel free to put them in the chat. Mike and I are happy to answer them if you have any comments as well. But let's talk about draft prep, Mike. Okay, first thing. So what do you do to get ready for drafts? Like, what's your draft preparation?
If you know your draft positioning beforehand, that's a big help. Sometimes in your home leagues, there's some sort of a competition or a loss for you to get your draft order. So knowing where you're going to pick can be helpful. You also want to make sure you're scouring whatever news source that you use for last minute injuries, position camp battles here at the end of camp. I'm going to see some guys get shifted to the practice squad, that kind of thing. An account that I would recommend that everyone follows both before the season and after is at 32 Beat Writers on Twitter. They do a good job of getting out all the information from beat writers, so that's very helpful. So again, you want to try, if you know your draft positioning, you can kind of lay out the first round, see how things might go, and then just make sure you're caught up on any last minute news before your draft kicks off.
So I was actually just thinking about this. It's amazing to me how much times have changed. So I used to work at the Sporting News. That was my first fantasy job. And my job in the morning was to scour the newspapers to find notes on players and then post them as player notes. Now, there's no excuse. Twitter has everything, or X, whatever you want to call it now. It's out there immediately. As soon as somebody gets hurt, as soon as something happens, a position battle, somebody gets cut, it's out there immediately. There's no excuse anymore. I mean, we used to have to look at the newspaper the next day to find the information. It's crazy how much times has changed in this industry, in my opinion, and it's for the better too because there's so much information out there. It's great to have it on hand so quickly.
Yeah,
You
I did the
remember?
same thing. I started back in 2007 with KFFL, and I used to have to go on all the newspapers. At least I got to use newspaper websites back then, and get the information and post it. So yeah, it's you can't miss anything now, especially an account like that. They give you everything just following one Twitter account. So yeah, it's important to be informed before you go into your draft.
Yeah, for sure. And I also like to study the ADP. Again, I don't think people should get caught up in it too much, but it's a good idea to study the ADP and see where players are getting drafted. And also get in as many drafts as you can before your home leagues. You can do mock drafts. We have those on our site. Also, I think getting in best ball leagues, if you want to put a little skin in the game, there's some as cheap as $10 on our site. Just drafting in general helps you prepare as well to see where players are landing. Play around with your drafts too if you want to take a quarterback early in some leagues, or if you want to go receiver heavy and see how it plays out. I think that's another really good strategy on preparing for your drafts. And like you said, knowing where you're picking really helps to prepare you when it comes to that type of stuff to map out a plan as well. And also, one other thing I did uh, want to point out is that, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought now. Okay. I'll remember it again sometime later, Mike, but I lost my train of thought here. So I'll move on to
You're
the
just
next
so
topic.
excited about talking
I
about
am.
dominating your home leagues. We're just gonna crush all these guys and gals that we went to high school with and college. You got too excited about it, Jeff.
Exactly, I did. So let's talk about things to be aware of during the draft. So things that are happening in the draft, things you should be cognizant of. How about you want to throw a few things out there for us, Mike?
Yeah. So one thing we talked about is bye weeks. You're going to want to make sure you've got your bye weeks covered. And here's a good example. So week 13 this season, here are the quarterbacks that are all going to be on a bye: Josh Allen, Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Kirk Cousins, and Daniel Jones.
Oof,
That's not only a
ouch.
lot of the top quarterbacks, but Kirk Cousins and Daniel Jones, they could be a top backup quarterback in some leagues, especially if you're playing in like a 10-team league. You could definitely get one of those two as your top backup. So if you think you're going to draft, Josh Allen and then back him up with Daniel Jones, that's not going to work because they both have the same bye week. So that's just an example. Make sure you're keeping an eye on bye weeks. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean for running backs and wide receivers that I would avoid my top two running backs having the same bye week. I would try to, but if there's two guys that you're set on, they have the same bye week, just make sure you have some reinforcements to cover that 1 week. And you might just have to consider that week a loss. But definitely bye weeks are something to keep an eye on as you're working through your picks.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too about bye weeks. You can't just totally avoid two players on the same bye week if it's good value, but you do want to keep up with that, especially when it comes to backups, when it comes to drafting for sure. And I wanted to talk about just paying attention to the draft around you. I think that's a mistake people make. They don't really pay attention to what's going on around them. But you can push a little draft board on our site, and it all comes up so you can see who's getting picked around you. I think you need to pay attention not only to your team, you need to pay attention to other teams as well. It's very important to know if you have the eighth pick or ninth pick and somebody's picking behind you and they have two quarterbacks already on their roster and you haven't picked a quarterback yet, go ahead and wait. You can wait another round or two before you pick them. So you need to be aware of what's going on around you as well as, keeping track of those bye weeks. Mike, I want to ask you about runs too. So how do you handle runs in drafts? So, four tight ends go off the board in the fifth round. You're up to pick. What do you do?
So this is where having tiers as opposed to a 1 through 200 ranking list is helpful. So you want to put the guys that you want to get into tiers. So you got tier 1, 2, 3, 4 running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. So say you're on the clock and you're liking how your team's coming together so far. You're trying to decide, maybe you've taken two running backs and two wide receivers to start. Your pick comes up. You've only got one running back left from your tier 3 options, but you have four wide receivers from your tier 3 options. Take the running back as opposed to the wide receiver, because by the time you come around again, you might be able to get one of those tier 3 wide receivers that you still have, but that running back might be gone. So that's why I think tiers are more important than a 1 through 150 or 200 straight ranking cheat sheet, because then you'll feel better about when you're going to take a pick and what position you want to target in the following round too.
I totally agree, Mike. I think tiering your rankings is huge. It's just a very important part of coming up with your ranking system, whatever you use. If you use somebody's site as a that you like, hopefully use ours. But I won't be offended if you don't. But whatever you use, yeah, you definitely need to tier them. You need to come up with what you want. Like if you have 8 guys you feel comfortable with as a number one back, tier it at that point and make sure you have one of those guys on your roster. You have to do that. It's very important. And also, you have to be able to adjust. So I feel like a lot of times people, when you don't have your rankings tier, you can't adjust like you need to. But things are going to happen in your draft that you're not prepared for. Somebody's going to take quarterbacks earlier than you expected. You have to be able to adapt and adjust. You can't just go into a draft thinking, I'm going to have a quarterback on my roster after 5 rounds. I'm going to have 2 running backs and 2 receivers and 1 quarterback, and that's it. No, you can't do that. It's nice to have a plan. It's good to have a plan, but you have to be able to adjust to what's going on around you.
Yeah, especially in home leagues. Your neighbor down the street who's a Jets fan, he might take guys or he might take Garrett Wilson in the first round, and you were thinking you were going to get him in the second. So you've got to be able to adjust to things like that. If you're not flexible, no draft is going to unfold exactly the way you want it. So you got to be able to pivot and have other strategies lined up.
For sure. Okay, Mike, let's throw out the trivia question so people get a chance to win this real time fantasy sports championship entry. Again, $500,000. This prize is valued at $300. So it's a huge, huge prize. So I want to ask this question. It's a little different. It's not quite, fantasy numbers related, but it's important to keep track of. What player led the league in fumbles lost last season? So the first person to put in the chat, what player led the league in fumbles lost last season will win an entry into the fantasy championship. Again, prize value at $300, $500,000 grand prize. Go to rtsports.com if you don't win, and you can sign up there for this great contest. Again, the question again, what player led the league in fumbles lost last season? First person up there will win that entry. Okay, Mike, let's get back into the draft prep. We talked about things to be aware of during the draft. Let's talk about mistakes that we think people make during the draft. Anything you see, anything stand out to you when it comes to draft and you think people make mistakes with?
Yeah, now fantasy football is supposed to be fun, right? We're supposed to pick players that we like. It's supposed to enhance our viewing on Thursdays, Sundays, and Mondays. But do it with a grain of salt here. You can't take Daniel Jones in the third round because you're a Giants fan and you want him on your team. There's got to be some reason here of when you want to pick a player. Now, you want to take a guy from your favorite team, maybe a round ahead of ADP? Sure, make sure you get him. But you can't be taking your favorite guys from your favorite team 3-4 rounds early because it's going to completely screw up your team. So try not to be too big of a homer.
I agree with that. Homer is a big one. I think it's good. Like you said, fantasy football is fun. You want players on your team that you can root for, but print out that ADP sheet, see where they're getting drafted, maybe go around earlier, but be smart about it. I think that's a great point, Mike. One thing I wanted to talk about, I think people make mistakes with in draft, is just too many rookies or sleepers. You see it in every league. There's some guy in your league who absolutely love rookies and just loads the roster up with 4 or 5 rookies, and then they're hurting because rookies don't always pan out, especially at some of these skill positions like QB, especially wide receiver. There's always a couple good rookies. I feel like running backs always has strong rookie class as well. A couple top guys that produce well, but for the most part, it's only a handful of rookies that come through and produce big. And I see it too much. I think too many people load up their roster with rookies. I think you can take a few. You want to try to find a guy that's going to break through and have a big season, but for the most part, I think I'm going to avoid loading my roster with rookies. You have any thoughts on rookies at all, Mike?
Yeah, I feel much more comfortable taking a rookie wide receiver and running back than I do quarterback and tight end for sure. So yeah, I'm on the same page as you there, Jeff.
Okay, we have some guesses too in the chat, and unfortunately, none of them have been right so far. Melvin Gordon, Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, Derrick Henry. He's trying. This user on here, Eckler, Aaron Jones. No, not quite. Maybe I'll give you one hint.
No Samaje Perine.
No
No
Samaje
Matt Breida.
Perine. It is
No.
it
Ah,
it is not it is not a running back or receiver. It's a QB. So there's your
oh,
hint. So a QB led the league in fumbles lost last season. So
is it
fumbles
Colt
in
McCoy?
general, no,
Oh, darn.
he said Mixon, not right either. He's trying. He's going all in. Any other mistakes, Mike, while we're on the subject that you want to talk about before we move on?
No, I think we've hit the two major ones. Don't be a homer and don't go too big on rookies, and don't panic too. Just because you lose a guy that you're trying to target and he gets selected, don't panic. There's plenty of other options out there. Be ready to pivot.
I agree. And one other thing I wanted to point out too, kind of along the same lines, is know your league rules. I think that's a big thing. I know it sounds dumb, but you'd be surprised. A lot of people don't know what their scoring system is in their league, and it impacts how you draft players. So I mean, some leagues 6 points for a quarterback scoring throwing a touchdown pass, some four. So those at six, a little more value. Some have 1.5 point PPR for tight ends. Just know your league scoring. It's very important to know it inside and out. A lot of you have been in leagues for a lot of years, your home league, so you know it pretty well. But for the most part, I think you need to have a good uh, grasp of your scoring system. The user is the one person messaging, still throwing them out there, still doesn't have it yet. A lot of
No,
good guesses
what
though.
Ryan is that? Is that Matt Ryan? Is that Ryan Tannehill?
Yeah, that's true.
Can I
There are
get
a lot of Ryans
where are we
out
going
there.
here?
Josh Allen. It could be Allen Robinson. It could be I don't know. Gotta be specific. You're getting close though. Maybe you're coming up. I might have to give some more hints coming up, but we'll see. Hopefully he figures it out or someone figures it out. Again, what player led the league in fumbles lost last season? Okay, Mike. Let's talk about this year now. So, your thoughts on drafting for this season? Anything standing out right now? Any trends? Anything you're seeing that you want to talk about?
Yeah, so we were kind of talking about what to do with quarterbacks, and as I've been doing drafts, I think what I want to do, I'm feeling this way more and more, is if I don't get Mahomes, Allen, or Hurts, those are the guys I'm targeting. If I don't get them, then my plan is to go with either Justin Fields in a 4 point passing TD league or Burrow and Herbert in a 6 point passing. So to give you an example of that, I just had a draft. It's a RotoWire Invitational. It's a staff league that we do. It's 4 points per passing TD and a 0.5 point PPR. So I had the eighth pick. Started out with Tyreek Hill. I grabbed Tony Pollard in the second round. By the time my third round pick had come up, Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts were all gone. Hurts was the last one to go. He went at the first pick in the third round. So I took a wide receiver. I took Keenan Allen in the third round, and then I went with Fields with the fifth pick in the fourth round. And I love how that team came out. There's plenty of other running backs and wide receivers. I had already gotten a couple wide receivers and my top running back, and then you get a guy in a 4 point passing TD with Fields who gives you a tremendously high floor. So I think if you miss out on one of those top three guys, I think that next tier of quarterbacks, I want to make sure I don't miss on those. If I do, then I'm going all the way, and I'm going to go with Kirk Cousins or Daniel Jones very late in the draft.
I like it, Mike. We have a winner. We finally have the correct guess. Trevor Lawrence led the league in fumbles last year.
Hey.
He had 9, and the next closest was 5. So he kind of dominated. So Trevor Lawrence wins. Trevor Lawrence is the correct answer, and this user OFace20 he wins the prize. If you could email contests@bettersportsnetwork.com, and we will get you your prize. So congratulations, and put that to good use in the fantasy championship. Again, that's a great value, $300, great contest. So Trevor Lawrence led the league in fumbles. All right, Mike, I'm going to tell you a few draft thoughts before we move on here real quick. So you talked about QB, and the price of QBs has gone up, in my opinion. It's pushed up this year. If you want to get one of these elite QBs, you got to act earlier than normal. I think because of last year, so many guys had huge seasons like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts. If you want one of these guys, you better act in the first 3 rounds. You're not going to get them. A lot of times you got to go in the second round. So that's one thing I noticed, QBs going earlier. And also, I feel like strategies are all over the map and working as well. So, you can take three receivers to start the draft and still come up with a pretty good team. You can take two running backs to start the draft. I thought it could be uh, more of a receiver heavy early in drafts this year with the way things have trended recently, but I'm still seeing a lot of different strategies, and I feel like a lot of them are working because I feel like receivers really deep this year, so you can still get some good value late. I also feel like some of the elite guys are just amazing, and if you take a couple of those guys early, you can still find good value late with a running back like an Alexander Madison or something like that. So I think a lot of different strategies are working this year, and it's been intriguing to watch, and I'm kind of interested to see how it plays out this year. Let's hit on the positions now, Mike. Let's talk about drafting a QB. You kind of went into it. What's your strategy for drafting a QB this year?
Yeah, like I said, if I miss out on one of those top three guys, that second tier, Fields, Herbert, and Burrow are guys I want to target. And if not, wait all the way. Go Kirk Cousins, go Daniel Jones. Those guys can still be good. Don't try and take both and stream them because they have the same bye week. Don't forget we talked about that. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's how I'm attacking the position.
And I think using high draft capital on two QBs is just kind of dumb. So don't do that. I don't like that at all.
Yeah.
But I'm like you. I want one of these top 8 guys. So I want Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Justin Fields, or Trevor Lawrence on my roster. I really am trying to target those guys this year. If I don't get one, I'm like you though. I'm waiting and letting it fall really far and getting a guy like Kirk Cousins. Jared Goff too is another guy I like a lot. Kenny Pickett too. I've been taking him a lot as my number 2. So that's kind of the way I'm approaching the QB position. Let's talk about running back now. Next position on the list. How are you drafting a running back this year?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of mid-round value. I mean, if you're looking on the RT Sports ADP, guys in the 5 to 7 round ranges, James Cook, James Conner, Khalil Herbert, those are all guys that I'd be definitely happy to have as my second or maybe third running back if you went heavy at the position early. In my drafts on other softwares, I've been able to get guys like Alexander Madison, Damian Pierce in the 5 to 6 round range. So I think the position is pretty deep. We haven't even touched on a guy like Cam Akers. So if you want to go wide receiver heavy early, or if you want to take that QB in the second or third round, I still think there's plenty of value at running back for later in the draft.
So I'm still kind of that old school of thinking. I've been doing this a long time. I still want at least an anchor running back on my roster. I'm not saying you have to take 2 anymore. Like it used to be, you had to take 2 running backs for the first 2 picks. That's what everybody did. But I'm okay with pivoting with that and not doing that. But I still want an anchor on my roster. That doesn't mean I have to take it in the first round. But if I can get a Tony Pollard on the way back in the second round, if I take an elite receiver in the first, I just want to make sure I have one of those guys I can really count on. But like you said, there's good value later in drafts too. And a guy I'm really high on is Damian Pierce. I feel like people are just kind of sleeping on him a little bit. I think they're going to run the ball a lot. He looked great last year, broke a lot of tackles. He's going to be involved more in the passing game this year, I think. And I don't trust Devin Singletary. I don't think he's very good. So Pierce is one of my guys I've been trying to get on a lot of teams. But again, I want an anchor running back on my team. And then I'm okay with, waiting a little bit to get that second one if I have to. All right. Next position, receiver. How are you approaching that one, Mike?
Yeah, so if you're in a PPR league, I definitely like taking one right away in the first round. If you're lucky enough to get a guy like Jefferson or Jamar Chase, definitely do it. But what stands out to me about the wide receiver position is how many good options there are with an ADP in the second round. The guys going in the second round: AJ Brown, Devontae Adams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, and Chris Olave. Those are all guys I would love to have on my team. And I'd be perfectly happy with having them as my wide receiver 1. So if you do not take one in the first round, maybe you went Bijan Robinson or something like that, there's still a lot of great top-end wide receivers available in the second round.
I think the receivers as deep as I've ever seen it. I really think there's a lot of great options you can get later. I mean, even somebody like Michael Pittman, I've talked about him a little bit. He had 141 targets last year. He has 88 plus catches 2 straight seasons. And he has a better QB situation with him this year. And he's way down. His ADP is like 30 plus. So I just think there's a lot of good options. Deontay Johnson, too. It's just a really deep position. So I'm still kind of like with the running back. I want to get an anchor, though. Like you said, if you can do it in the second round, that's totally fine. If you want to do it at the end of the first, that's fine, too. But I just want to make sure I at least have an anchor. And then I might wait a little bit on that position, especially if I have to take a QB in the second or third round, because I want to get Hurts or Mahomes on my roster, and then wait a little bit. You can still get good value with Deontay Johnson, Chris Godwin. These are all guys you can get a lot later, and I still think are going to produce well and could end up being top 15 option. Let's move on to the tight end position. We're kind of getting short on time here a little bit, Mike, but how are you drafting the tight end this year?
I'll go quick. If I get Darren Waller in the 5th round of every draft, I'm doing it. He's the guy that I'm targeting the most this year. If not, I'm going to wait on the position, maybe get a guy like Freiermuth late in the draft. You go real late, get Tyler Higbee, something like that. If I get Darren Waller, I'm taking him. If not, I'm waiting.
I'm kind of the same way. I've been experimenting with Kelsey a little bit lately, taking him in the 1st round because he's kind of just fallen to me. And I don't really like my build when I do that in some of these best ball leagues. But for the most part, I'm waiting. I like Evan Ingram late. I like David Njoku late. Even Dallas Goedert, I feel like he's going later than he should. Dalton Kincaid, too, a guy I've been taking a chance on. So I'm going mid to later rounds for the most part when it comes to tight end, unless I get good value with someone like Waller. If he slips to me, then I might consider drafting him. I've come around to Waller a little bit. I wasn't super high on him early on, but man, he's had some sort of connection in training camp. In that first preseason game, he got looked at a lot. So I'm coming around to him a little bit, Mike. All right, drafting a defense and kicker. Let's touch on that real quick.
This is where we save time. Take it with your last 2 picks. Don't overthink it. Move on.
I agree, Mike. I'm the same way. Last 2 picks. Again, know your scoring system, though. If for some reason your defense scores a lot, or kicker has some added bonuses for 50-yard field or something where they have more value, and some guys might have more value, but for the most part, yeah, last 2 rounds. So that's how I approach defense and kicker. All right, before we get out of here, let's do auction draft strategy. Just real quick, if you have any advice for auctions, it's become really popular on our site as well, but any auction draft tips for all of our viewers out there?
Yeah, here's what I like to do. I like to plan an ideal team that I want to get and what I'm willing to pay for each of those players. Remember, auction, you can get any. If you want Mahomes, Justin Jefferson, and McCaffrey, you can do it. You got to pay for it, and the rest of your team might look pretty ugly, but you can do it. So get a sheet of paper. I'm old school. Get a sheet of paper out, write all the guys you want and how much you're willing to pay for it. As your draft goes, based on, so say you allotted $30 for your quarterback and $40 for your running back. You get your first running back and you get them for $35. You now have a plus $5 to use at other positions down the road. Keep a tally. So if you know you're up or down based on what you've budgeted before the draft for each position. That way, as it moves along, you might be able to get some guys that you didn't think you were going to be able to get, but you were able to save a couple dollars here and there, and you've got 5 extra to spend. So keep a running tally. I like to call it the plus minus auction tally, and do that with every player that you pick. And that way you'll be able to maybe get some guys that you weren't expecting.
I do the exact same thing. And also, I think it's very important when it comes to auctions to tier your rankings as well, because I want to make sure I get, if I want a number 1 back, again, I want to get one of those top 7 guys, and when they start evaporating, leaving the draft boards, then I want to make sure I have one on my roster before that happens. So for sure, tiering your rankings when it comes to auction draft strategy, just make sure you want to get certain value with your auction draft for sure. So I think that's a huge thing to do, is make sure you tier your rankings and make sure you know what you have on your roster. So Mike, it's been a lot of fun talking about draft strategy. I think we really got people ready for their drafts coming up this weekend and next weekend. Again, if you want to draft here at RealTime Fantasy Sports, go to rtsports.com. All sorts of options on there. You can run your leagues on our site as well. We have a great commissioner product too. Mike, again, I really appreciate you joining me. It's been 3 weeks in a row. We got one more week with you next week too. Should be a lot of fun.
I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, I'm the preseason guy here, so keep me locked in. I'm ready to go.
Yeah, for sure. Next week, we're going to have on a guest too. We're going to have on Glenn Colton from Colton and the Wolfman, Sirius XM Fantasy Radio. He does a great job. We're going to talk football with him. So again, tune in next week. Appreciate Mike joining me, and I appreciate everybody watching out there. This has been Jeff Paur with RealTime Fantasy Sports. Have a great day, everyone.